Hey, are you interested in learning how to be your own bank? We say you can be a customer of the bank or you can be the bank. So I just want to recognize the sponsor of this show, my firm, Practical Wealth Solutions. And so we help people set up privatized banking systems so that we can get interest moving towards you rather than away from you. So if you want to set up your infinite banking policy up properly, right? We use properly structured dividend paying whole life as a place to store cash. And you want access to a coach that will show you how to integrate this into your investing, to expand your business, to protect your capital from market downturns, taxes, predators and creditors. What I want to do is I want you to go to practicalwealthsolutions.net. Go to the bottom. We're going to send you a little mini course on banking, and then you can reach out to us. Or, if you already know you want to do it, you can go right to the set up a strategy session with one of the coaches, and we will get you on the path to be in the bank. Enjoy the show. All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Practical Wealth Show. So we're going to again talk about one of my favorite topics, business. So we're going to talk about running a business to increase value and profitability, and which will also increase the likelihood if you want to sell it, you can. So you want to think about that from the get-go. And so I have a really accomplished entrepreneur. I'm going to let her tell you the bulk of her story, Jessica Fialkovich.
Close enough. Fialkovich.
Yep. All right. Thank you. And but Jessica, you know what I saw? I was looking on your website. I want you to tell me about yourself. So she's a business exit expert, right? Let me just give you your props first. And best-selling author, speaker, and business advocate. She sold her first business a decade ago at 15. No, he had and she I think you're 25, right? Or you started your first business.
I started with my first business.
Right, because think about well, here's what I saw. I'm doing Jack this whole introduction up, but this is a fun fact was you worked for the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles.
I did. Yeah. Out of college, I started in sports. So I worked for the Philadelphia Eagles during college in my last year. And then I moved over into hockey. So I worked for the Philadelphia Flyers organization for about four years before I made the transition to the entrepreneurship.
So were you in school in the area?
Yeah. I grew up in Southern New Jersey and went to a small college called the College of New Jersey. It used to be called Trenton State for any people that remember that.
I'm in Philly. I'm in on the main line, but I grew up in Philly. So, Sixers, Eagles, Flyers to a lesser extent because there's not a huge hockey fan, but I'm a Philly whatever. Whoever's winning, I like them, but we believe Eagles green here. And the Sixers. Okay.
Yeah. I joke that's like the best thing I ever did for my parents because my dad's a diehard Eagles fan and my mom's a diehard Flyers fan. So, growing up in South Jersey, I was raised with that. And it's the best thing I've ever done as a daughter is, work for the Eagles.
Work for the Eagles,
some tickets. Got my mom to meet Bernie Perrant a few times, who was like her local hero. So best thing I ever did was work for the teams. Worst thing I ever did was quit to start my own business because my mom's like, where'd my Flyers tickets go?
Right.
And I'm like,
that's hilarious. So that little fun fact aside, so what happens is she has built the fastest growing, most successful business brokerage firm in the US, and she realized that most business owners that decide to sell really aren't prepared to sell, right? And and so she is basically she works them through that as after exiting several successful businesses herself. What I find fascinating, Jessica, is that the whole idea of finding
buying a business, buying an already up and running business. And one of the things that I've been telling people, buying is the new starting. And a lot of people, I'm starting to get in groups where they're talking about buying business, but one of the things I'm trying to, hey, look, it's you're buying cash flow. They already have a customer base, and you should think about that, right? And so you help people either way, sell it and buyers. It's like a real estate broker, except for you're selling the business.
Exactly. That's the best metaphor. And but yes, I totally agree with you. There's a whole movement, and I call it entrepreneurship through acquisition, right? But sometimes it's better to buy a business than start it from scratch, because there is cash flow and all that kind of stuff. But yes, so my background is I own multiple business brokerage firms in Colorado, Texas, and Nevada. We have been recognized as the number one office in our brand, in our franchise brand, for the last 7 years running in the world. And really that spurred me off of starting this consulting company, Exit Factor, to help people get ready to sell or get ready to buy. We do also have buyer prep courses too, because a lot of people don't know what that process is of buying or selling a business. It's not something that's really well talked about or well educated. Not a lot of people know about it. It's like, I don't want to call it the best kept hidden secret, but it is a hidden secret.
Yeah. How did you get into that space from what you were doing?
Yeah. So my first business was actually in the wine and spirits space. So I was 25 at the time, and my husband and I were getting laid off from our jobs. We were working, actually, I did a really short stint in commercial real estate development in 2008, which was the worst time to go into commercial real estate development, right? So we got laid off from our jobs, and we looked around. We're like, what do we want to do with our lives? And at that point, we had a friend that owned a wine bar, and we're like, hey, he's got a great life. He gets to sell and drink wine all day. Why don't we do that? So we did a little bit of R&D, rip off and duplicate, and started our own boutique wine business in Naples, Florida. And that business grew really quickly. And 30 months later, we were propelled into some really super niche collectors markets that allowed us to grow very fast. And 30 months later, we had the opportunity to sell the business. So that's what we decided to do. And that was my first introduction. I knew that I would always transition out of that business. I knew I wasn't going to sell wine the rest of my life, but I'd never thought about the process of selling or how that would come about. And so through that sale of our first business to Candid was really how I got introduced to the entire industry.
And then from there, did you go into the because I'll tell you what I do. I like the journey, and then I want you to talk to the business specifically. But I like, how do you do this? How do you do this? Because nobody grows up saying, I want to be a business broker. I'm in financial services. I didn't really wake up and decide I was going to do insurance and financial planning. So I was like, I don't know how I got here, other than the NBA wasn't looking for 5'11" shooting guards. So that was the So that's actually what happened. So
no, and I love this story too. It's a great question. So after we sold our business, we did sell through a business broker. And we had a great financial transaction, but I felt like the broker, he wasn't really sensitive to small business owners' needs, right? A lot of times, and I think at the time we exited, we were about 3 million in revenue. So we were a small business, but not a very small business.
Right.
And he kept making comments like, you're too small. No one's going to want this. You're too small. This is too hard. Things like that. And I really didn't like the approach and attitude really through the transaction. So after we sold, my husband, dog, and I took a 6-month road trip, and we're road tripping through the US and Canada. And we just keep talking, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? And we knew we were going to land in Colorado. And we kept coming back to business brokerage. We're like, well, this guy did an okay job, right? And was successful for us. What if we just do it a little bit better? One of my mentors in the wine industry told me, if you ever find an industry where you can do things just 1% better than your competition, you completely crush it. Right. So here was an opportunity where we could not just be 1% better, but we could be 10% better. Right. As we thought. And we've now found it's much more than that. So when we landed in Colorado, and this is one of the things, I do believe in fate or karma, right? In some scheme of it. So we were researching different franchise brands that were involved in business brokerage. and there was a brand, Transworld Business Advisors, and their offices were up for resale. So like we just talked about, like starting from scratch is not always what I want to do.
Right.
So here was an office that was, not very well, but a little established. It was in Denver where we wanted to live. And it was available for sale, like at the time we were looking for a business. So that was really how we got introduced to that specific brand. And then once we met the owner of the corporate locations of the franchise, he's actually from South Jersey too, grew up on the Jersey Shore like we did. So that was like another connection. But he, more importantly, like their vision of what business brokerage is and how small business is so crucial to not just that industry, but our country, like that mission and value they have, we aligned really well on. So it was a perfect fit. So that's kind of what took us from wine into business brokerage. I also joke, like, I also thought at the time, like, hey, well, maybe we'll go do business brokerage for a little bit, find our next thing, like we'll buy our next business and then move on. But my husband and I both ended up falling in love with the industry and really do love what we do. So
do you find it's seasonal or, like real estate? Well, it really depends on your marketing, but is there better times than not to sell or buy a business?
Yeah. So throughout the year, there's not much seasonality, but there's a little bit. And and when I explain this to people, it's they find it really interesting. So the first quarter of the year is always our busiest in terms of buyer inflow, and it's tied to New Year's resolutions. So if you look at the top New Year's resolutions every year, change of career is usually number 2 or 3, right? And leaving a corporate job to become an entrepreneur, to become a business owner is tied into that resolution. So we get a really big spike of buyer activity in the first quarter of the year. So like I always tell sellers, like if you're thinking about selling a business, like have it on the market January 2nd, you're going to get a big spike. Q2 is pretty steady. And then we have a little bit of a summer lull. Just like a lot of industries, people go on vacation, they're wrapped up in doing other things. And then as soon as the kids go back to school, so depending where you are, sometimes between like mid-August to early September, as soon as the kids go back to school, we see another giant buyer spike. And I think that's just like, we're back from summer vacation now, we're ready to refocus on it. So then the second best time to list the business for sale would be like in that, end of Q3, beginning of Q4, like September, October timeframe.
Yeah, I find that after kids go back, they get back. All right, let's get back to work now. Right?
Yeah.
And what are some of the most common challenges that business owners face that you think, and how do you kind of help them overcome those challenges when buying or selling?
Yeah. So on the sell side, actually, I think it's both sides. It's expectations, right? So on the sell side, a lot of people are like me, where the first time they go through a sales process is their first time. They have no idea what to expect, right? But they do have preconceived notions on valuation, and how payment terms and how they're going to get paid for a business and things like that. And I think with lack of education and not understanding how the market works, how business valuation actually works, they have these preset expectations that actually price them out of the market. So then they'll get frustrated because the business isn't selling. So we do have on my Exit Factor company, we have an educational and consulting program that helps people get ready for sale. And while we're getting ready, we're introducing those educational components. Like, how does the market work? How does business valuation work? What should I expect through the process? And then on the flip side, the buyers too, it's same things with expectations, like just preconceived notions. This is actually opposite, right? I always joke that sellers always think their business is worth, more than it probably is. And buyers always think a business is worth less than it probably is, or, so buyers do also have a lack of education about how things work and processes. So we do have a intro to buy course, but on the buyer side too, there's just some process things that they won't realize. So less on the price, but more, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement for every business that you inquire about. That's just like a process thing, right? And no one ever negotiates those non-disclosure agreements. So we'll have buyers that come in sometimes and their expectation is that they're going to review and revise every single legal document in this process. But what they don't understand, because of lack of education, it's not their fault, is that those non-disclosure agreements are written for thousands of businesses every year, hundreds of thousands of buyers sign them. So by, trying to negotiate or throwing a fit about a non-disclosure, you're actually throwing a red flag up about yourself, right? And that's one example, but it's just, it goes back to the lack of education that results in misaligned expectations for how the process is actually going to go.
I saw on your website, it said, it's really, it was something like you're not too big or too small. Maybe I'm exaggerating that a little bit to think about selling your business. Because one of the things the niche you found was that the guy was kind of sitting towards you because he felt 3 million was small, right?
Yeah.
Where is that? How small is, if this is a thing, too small? That that's you're not ready yet, or you need to grow, or maybe we can look at this again in 2 years. Like, do you ever have that situation where they kind of get their stuff together? All of them, I'm sure, have to get their stuff together, but
yeah, exactly. So, one of my soapboxes I get on is no one is too small. Look, even in the last 10 years, there's been websites that have popped up where you can just sell off your intangible assets, like your customer list, your website, things like that. Like, you can always get something for your business and your business assets, no matter what happens. There's a thriving marketplace. It just goes back to expectations, right? If your business has declining revenue, if it's not profitable, you're not going to get $1 million for it. You're just not. But could you get $10,000 or $20,000 for some of your websites and your customer lists? Yeah. And for some people, that's a big deal to at least not walk away without anything, but some type of income from it. Now, when does it come to they have to work on that business? That's where that misaligned expectations comes in, right? If your business, say, is worth $300,000 today and you want to sell it for $1 million, there is a path to get it to that $1 million valuation. But that path involves some work, right? And some energy redirected into the business. Usually some help from advisors like myself and some time. It might take you 1 year, 2 year, 5, 10 years. It really depends on how quickly you can implement the changes in the business. But there is a path. So that's where the conversation might be, okay, not today, but 2 years from now. It's more about the business owner wants to invest their time and their energy to get to that goal valuation versus some companies they have to sell today, right? They just have personal issues going on and they don't have time or energy to dedicate to that process.
It's it's a good time to buy. If I'm a buyer, it's like real estate, like you got a distressed seller that needs to get stuff out. I think it's kind of like the E-Myth, right? So the combination of the E-Myth is how I think about it, and the cash flow quadrant from Kiyosaki. So where you think you have a business, but you're really self-employed.
Yep.
And nobody wants to buy that. But in 2 years, you could go to work on the business, develop systems to become a B. So now it's an asset that is sellable.
Yeah.
And do you find a challenge with getting people into that mindset?
Yeah, a little bit. It's not the mindset, more as, the running on the hamster wheel analogy, right? We're all so busy in our businesses, and in order to move to that business owner versus the operator, like, you have to take a step back and you have to work on your business strategically, and spend even more time on your business. And I think that's the hamster wheels. Like, we're running, trying to keep the business going and keep our operational stuff. And then we also need to step outside and work on the business strategy to move ourselves to that ownership role. Because there is, just the fact of the matter is there is a size that you have to be in order to be able to move into that ownership role. Right. It differs for every company, right? And in your revenue and your profitability structure, but you have to be able to afford staffing, help in order to make that happen. Right. So I think it's less of a mindset, but it's the overwhelm and honestly, the fatigue. That's really the barrier to get the business owner moving towards that path sometimes.
Let me ask you, so let's talk about, then I want you to tell me about exit and your business, but I'm curious about what I've been in this mastermind group, and I'm exposed to people that, which is new to me. I have a young lady, I'm gonna bring her on my show, but she has a standing thing with a business broker where she's bringing her stuff all year long, and she looks to buy a new one to add on to what she's doing about every 18 months.
Yep.
And so talk about that growth through acquisition mindset that I should be paying attention, and either competitors or people that do something that they buy stuff either before they come to me or after or whatever, and just growing your business that way. Because I heard you talk about that. So I want to give them a little bit on that. I think that's brilliant.
I think growth through acquisition is probably the most underrated growth strategy. That's how I mentioned at the top of our session that I have business brokerage offices in 3 states. I've acquired all of those through acquisition. I haven't done it, so I'm a personal believer in it too. But what I think people miss is when you look at all of the time and money you have to invest to grow organically, especially if you're entering new markets or you're entering new product or service segments. In the long run, most of the time that will cost more than just buying a cash flowing business. So, and in our intro to buying course, we also do have, it's structured for growth through acquisition, but there's a couple things that you can do in order to position yourself that way. One is to have a relationship with a business broker or an investment banker that's bringing you deals. It's like another part-time job to search for businesses for sale. So if you have a relationship with somebody who can just bring you stuff that they know will fit your qualifications, that's really helpful. The other thing too is that with growth through acquisition, you really want to narrow your focus to something that can help your business, right? So it could be a competitor, right? Or like I said, you can also expand your services. So you could look at people you do business with, whether it's vendors or customers, and maybe grow your footprint as a business that way instead by offering more products and services. But being very narrow in your focus and your search will actually help you more, because it generates less overwhelm, right? Now, you like, say the next market I want to grow in is Wyoming, right? I only need a business broker relationship in Wyoming and not all 50 states, right? Or if I'm searching specifically to buy business brokerage offices, I know I need to form relationships in the IBBA, which is the industry association, right? So things like that. And then there's all kinds of benefits to your business. But the other thing I'll say, and the one cautionary thing I always have, is there is a transition phase, right? So you acquire someone else's business. Now that team, those customers need to transition into your business model. And the times when I see this not go well is when there's a huge cultural difference, right? So I've already said, like, I don't believe that any business is too small. I think everything has a value. If I acquire a business broker that says, well, I think, businesses that don't generate at least 5 million in revenue are completely worthless, and his whole team have that belief, that's going to be a big cultural disconnect when we integrate. And so the times when I've seen this growth through acquisition strategy go wrong is where there's a forced integration of completely opposite cultures in a business. So that's like the one big thing. And like, yes, there's due diligence stuff that you have to do, or financial analysis and whatever. But sometimes I think that cultural component is even more important when you're vetting whether it's appropriate or not to grow through acquisition and buy a competitor.
Do you think like you're good at marketing? Like do you look at, I was on a Russell Brunson podcast. He calls it the Rembrandt in the attic, where he sees some thing that everybody else missed. Oh, if I could get this thing, I can grow this, because the owners are tired and they're not really maximizing what I call their marketing assets. I mean, so when I don't know if you help them. I don't know. A lot of business owners aren't good marketers, so they may not see that right away. They're buying it, and then do you help them see that kind of stuff? And hey, look, you've got this, but they also got 5,000 people on a customer list, which is an asset that they may not be mailing or communicating with, that could generate X amount of dollars. Is that part of the acquisition process, do you think?
Not specifically, but one thing I talk to buyers about is that you should be aware of what your one unique ability is. So every entrepreneur, I believe, has like one really good, unique ability, better than everybody else. I will say that I have a lot of people that are like, oh, it's marketing, and it's usually not marketing, right? Unless they're an expert marketer, right? But My unique ability is strategy and vision. So like I can see how things are going to unfold 5-10 years down the road before it even happens. I can just see all the pictures come together, pieces come together in my mind. Right. And so if I can find a company that lacks that unique ability, that is my ideal acquisition. Right. If I can see a company, another business brokerage office who hasn't figured out their strategy, who hasn't figured out their long-term vision, but all the other pieces are in place, I know I can come in and I can institute immediate change. Marketing is another great example. Staffing and recruiting, sales, like just knowing what your one unique ability is. And then that's your golden acquisition. And a lot of other buyers will say, hey, this company doesn't have a good sales team. They don't know how to sell. And there won't be a lot of buyer activity for that business for that reason. But for you, it might be, this is a perfect acquisition and I'm not competing against a bunch of other people, but I know I can solve this problem.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, because I follow Dan Kennedy. Your unique ability is what are you excellent at, right? So that, because I try to work, what am I really good at? What's not, what am I good at? Because you kind of get good at everything, but what am I, where am I in the zone, right? And all I want to do is that. So I'm working at constantly outsourcing that because I only want to do the stuff that I'm really good at that has high dollar activity. So Jessica, tell them about, so let's transition into how you help people because it sounds like you have two businesses. You have the consulting company, you have the brokerage. So tell them how that and how you help these people either sell or grow their current business through acquisition, maybe a story or two of where that's worked out.
Yeah. And so the brokerage,
that's a mouthful, but sorry, I was trying to get it all out of my
brokerage, the brokerage business is like, I was able to make that transition to owner, right? So I have a team. My husband leads those businesses. I'm not involved in them anymore, except from a board level. So my role now as the founder and president of Exit Factor, we help buyers and sellers get prepared for a transaction. So on the sell side, what that means is prior to a sale, it can be anywhere from a year to 10 years ahead of time. And, I'll explain the timeline in a minute. What we do is we help establish what the company is worth today. So where's the baseline? And then we help establish what has to get done to hit your goal sale price. So when we were talking about that example earlier, a business that's worth $300,000, how do you get to $1 million? We give them that roadmap and then we work with them along the way to make sure the roadmap's implemented and they're ready for sale at that maximum valuation. And then on the buy side, it's really educational, right? So we don't do like a lot of road mapping. It's not as intense as the sellers, but we do have intro to buy classes and growth through acquisition classes where we just help educate the buy side market of like, this is the process. These are the tools you're going to need. These are the advisors you're going to need. Like we've have some of the best business bankers in the country as partners. So they can help get financing, things like that.
That's so good. I think it's just such a foreign thought process to people. I think that if you can hold your hand and, all right, because you don't know what you don't know. And just like you're buying your house for the first time. I mean, there's all this gray area right there. You heard to do it. And a business is so many more moving parts. My favorite asset class is business. Like to me, a business is the fastest path to cash. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
And, so I'm with you there. So I love that. So Jessica, what didn't I ask you that I should ask you that you want to say? That's my catch-all.
You know what? I know. You know what? We'll talk about the elephant in the room. A lot of people are worried about the economy right now. And I get lots of questions of like, how does the economy affect business sales? And honestly, it does, but not at the degree that we would all think of, right? So we talked a little bit about seasonality and when's the best time to sell a business throughout the year. But people will ask me like, when's the best time to sell? Like, should the stock market be up or what? And it's completely unrelated. So another little known secret is that there are way more buyers looking for businesses than there are businesses for sale at any given moment. Right now, if I look in the data in our business brokerage offices, we probably have 300 buyers for every business listing that we have. So
really?
Yeah, so it's more of a supply and demand thing. So there's always more, there's always less good businesses for sale than there are buyers. So that holds business valuations fairly steady through
Yeah.
any economic condition. Now, there's other things with payment terms and interest rates and all that kind of stuff, especially on the buy side, that you have to consider. But it's its own like little bubble market that endures ups and downs. And to your point of business class, right? Small businesses are resilient. And I think because of that resiliency, the ability to buy or sell at one through any economic condition really endures. So
It's funny. I heard that you say it's more because I've heard that there's all these baby boomers that want to sell, and then there's not as many buyers. Like you just said the complete opposite of that. So I'm like,
yeah. Well, so me and my mentor, Andy, started that conversation back in like 2017. It's not true anymore. So back in like 2016 and 2017, if you look at the demographics, millennials were not very entrepreneurial. So their parents, baby boomers, like, I mean, over half of small businesses in America are run by baby boomers still to this day. And millennials were like the least entrepreneurial generation we'd ever seen until the pandemic. So pandemic happens and they decide, hey, I want to control my own future. I want to control my own schedule. And we have this thing happen called the Great Resignation. And you have a lot of people talking about, well, where did all these people go? Where did all they resign to? Well, a large portion of them resigned to become business owners and resigned to become entrepreneurs. And so we saw, I think the highest spike we had was in 2021, and our buyer volume was 4 times what it was in 2019. So
wow,
that concern that we had of like, we didn't have enough buyers for all the baby boomers businesses,
that went away. I did not know that. That's fascinating. Okay. Cause you wonder, where are they? And, cause if they're not working, what are they doing? I mean, the stimulus checks ran out, and, but people realize, okay, I think I can see where they've come more entrepreneurial. Cause I'll have clients, they want to do a business, but they don't really, they're not thinking about, so I'm going to have to listen to the show because they're not thinking about buying. And some of them have hefty 401ks or whatever. And they could, how do they talk? Let's talk about funding for a second. And then, because I think that then they're thinking, because they think that, okay, well, the business is $1 million or whatever. And I don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get that. It's a big misconception for buyers. So there's a few different buckets you can pull funding from. So first is cash. You're going to have to put some amount of cash down, depending on the size of the deal. And the rest of the buckets you use, it's usually between 10 to 50% cash down. The second major bucket that's used is SBA loans. So the SBA does not loan money unless it's an idle loan, which was from the pandemic. But you can go to a bank and there's this thing called an SBA guarantee program. And the bank will lend you money to buy a business because the government will guarantee that a major portion of that loan is repaid. If you don't repay it, there's a guarantee. And that's really important in our economy because it allows the businesses to make, or the banks to make loans they normally wouldn't. So SBA loans, 7A is the most popular one. But typically you're going to put down about 20% cash, and then the bank will fund the rest, sometimes a little bit more, a little bit less. The third big bucket is seller financing. So seller financing is used in some form in almost every business acquisition. So sometimes it's a small portion, like if you are using that SBA loan, the seller might only carry 10%. And if there's not an SBA loan, they might carry more. And really that's less about money, but more about keeping the seller involved. Right. Making sure they don't disappear to their private island, never answer their cell phone again when the buyer has a question 18 months after the sale. So, and then the last bucket's kind of tied back to cash, but a lot of people just don't have cash laying around anymore. Right. But you can use your retirement funds to fund the purchase of a business without taking the withdrawal hits and things like that. And I won't get into detail because I'm not an expert on the topic, but like, you can use your 401k, you can use your IRA to fund a portion or all of a business acquisition.
So. I had a client do that with a laundromat, and there's a special, I don't even understand it, but a special thing where you can, he bought the whole thing. It was fascinating. It did very well. So that is awesome. So Jessica, I appreciate your time here, and I could figure out something else to talk about for at least for a good hour, but I'm not. How should they follow? How can I get in touch with you? Follow what you're doing, and who should be following you? Tell them who should be calling you or looking at your stuff. Where are they in their life right now? That hey, you should reach out to Jessica.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think if you own a business, I think it's important to be prepared for an exit at any time. So even if you're just following me, I'm mostly on LinkedIn and Instagram at Jessica Fialkovich. If you go to exitfactor.com/podcast, it has a link to all of my socials too, and you can send an email. So if you own a business, like just preparing, even if it's just preparing with education, is really the first step. And you should be doing that from day one of your ownership journey. If you didn't do it from day one, now's a great time to start, but really just getting in that mindset of your business should be positioned to sell for the maximum value at any time. So if something does happen in your life, you're ready to pull that trigger. And then I do talk about buy side stuff on there too. And I think too, it's like, if you're a buyer, you should want to understand where a seller is coming from. And if you're a seller, you should want to understand where a buyer is coming from. So even a lot of the education we do with our sellers, it's from the buyer's perspective. So our program is built on buyer feedback. So fortunately, I get to, work with thousands of buyers every year. And I talk to them about, what are you willing to buy and what are you willing to pay a premium for? Because ultimately that's going to dictate the market value of the businesses, not some formula out of a textbook.
I love it. Okay. So listen, if you're that, I would follow her on LinkedIn and then give them your website. The website is really good also.
Yeah. So exitfactor.com is our business website. And my personal website is Jessica Fialkovich. That's Fialkovich. Even if you screw up the spelling, it'll come up on Google. There's only one of me.
Okay.
But JessicaFialkovich.com.
All right. So we're going to put that in the show notes. And this is, I think, even if you're in business, I think you should follow her just because, like you said, you want to start from the day one of working on it. You get it so good that you may not need to sell it, but then you may want to sell it and get the cash out and go do something else. And because security, guys, is the ability to produce. So if you can find value, create, manufacture value, and buy something where you see the Rembrandt in the attic, so to speak, where you can fix it, your unique ability can help this baby go, then you want to keep your eyes out. And so I think that you just need somebody to coach you on how to think about that. And Jessica's your girl.
Well, thank you so much, Curtis, for having me.
Let's say it right. You're the woman. You're a woman.
There you go. Well, it's been a great conversation. I'm so glad to be on the show.
Yes. Thanks for having me. No, thanks for being on. I'm sorry. I forget where I was. Right. Yeah. So, and my pleasure. And guys, so go out there, check her out. We're going to put her links in the show note. And I hope you learned something today. This is a listen to again, writer downer. Leave us a review and have a great day, everybody. Be prosperous.